One of the interesting boilerplate provisions that shows up in most agreements is governing law. And the reason this is interesting is that the parties can actually choose which state's law will govern the contract, or if it's a cross-border deal, which country's law will govern. And there can be huge differences between the laws of one state or another across the whole range of issues that can show up in an M&A agreement. So when you have a choice of law provision and you pick a particular state, there are consequences that flow from that are kind of hidden throughout the document. The words say one thing, but they'll have a different meaning in one state or another. I'll give you an example that we talked about sandbagging in a prior video. And this is the idea that the buyer can discover that a representation or warranty made by the seller isn't true before closing, and they don't necessarily have to tell the seller. They know it's not true. They can sit on that information, and after the deal closes, they can sue the seller for the damage because of the breach of that rep, even though the buyer knew about it before the deal closed. Well, what if there's no provision in the document? It doesn't say that the buyer has the right to sandbag. And it also doesn't say that the buyer has no right to sandbag. It's just there's nothing written in the agreement on that subject. Interestingly, the states, various states will provide a different answer on this question. So in New York, if your contract is governed by New York law, you don't necessarily have the right as a buyer to sandbag the seller if the agreement is silent. You might. It's kind of complicated and cloudy. And as a general matter, you should assume you don't have that right. And that's the simplest formulation on that. However, in Delaware, if Delaware is the governing law of your M&A agreement and you're silent on it, you actually do. The case law is pretty clear on this, that the buyer will retain the right to sandbag the seller. And so that choice of Delaware and New York, and let's face it, actually in these agreements, those are the two primary choices that people are jumping between. You can have wildly different consequences to that decision about which law governs. Something certainly to pay close attention to.